Hello, you. I have been thinking, since I last uploaded, that I mentioned having this new thing wrong with me has now made me feel in some ways back to where I was when I first was diagnosed. Not a great place to be. Because you start to think you can function, and a lot of the time you distract yourself, or you're not thinking about it, or it's not preying on your mind in the same way. And that's not really true at the moment. And I was trying to think of why that was, apart from the obvious. Because I knew that I'd felt like this before, not just when I was first diagnosed, but I had felt like it before. And it was actually the most vivid picture was the day of my mother's funeral. And I was in the car going to the church for the funeral ceremony. And I remember looking out of the window at North London doing what it does and thinking, how can these people possibly carry on as if everything's normal? It's not normal, and it may never be normal again, and that's how you're working. And I don't feel quite like that at the moment. I don't wonder how everyone can continue their lives when, moi has cancer. Not at all. But the feeling that was similar was one of grief. And grief is something that everyone, myself included, associates with death and dying, and then I thought about it and I thought, well, actually, it's loss, isn't it? It's loss. And having cancer, I have had to mourn, not exactly mourn, I've had to accommodate the fact that life isn't how I'd planned it. It never is. But it really, this has thrown a curveball, and for many, many people, not just with cancer, but other serious health conditions, it throws out an awful lot. It calls into question, are you ever going to have children? It's going to call into question, are you going to ever have the career you wanted, which requires a degree of physical fitness? Are you going to be able to continue with your much-loved career when your vision's affected and your career requires vision? Do I want to stay with my partner? Does my partner want to stay with me? How all sorts of things. I'm not going to be around to see my children grow up. There's a loss of me and my partner, we're going to grow old together. All sorts of things that people go through, and there is a real sense of loss, except that it isn't yet loss, and that's what makes it so difficult, in my view, to deal with. I apologise for the fact that my right leg keeps threatening to have cramp, and so it's a bit uncomfortable at the moment. So those things haven't happened yet, and maybe they never will, but maybe they will, and you don't know. And so you can't plan for such uncertainty. You can't know, because we don't yet, until we are at the end, that these things won't happen. So you're left feeling a sense of loss and a sense of grief for things that are there, and for things that may well be there in the future. You have no, just as much chance as anybody else. But then this thing's been slapping you around the face and reminding you that actually it might not be you. And so you're left in a situation where you're trying to grieve something, but actually it might still be there. And there is always the worry that it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. If you decide that you're never going to become a concert pianist, then you give up the piano. Well, you've guaranteed you're never going to be a concert pianist. So it's difficult to know, because the grief is real, it's painful, but you're not sure what you're grieving for, except in a very general sense, a life that you had foreseen for yourself, maybe even planned for yourself, worked towards, and that it may happen that it evaporates. Now, I can't tell you that, buck yourself up and it will all be fine, and cheer up, it may never happen, and all that rubbish. It's difficult to plan for the future when you have cancer. It's enormously difficult to plan for the future when you don't know some things that you thought were fairly fundamental about yourself. Your desire to be a mother, or your desire to do a particular job, or move to a particular country. All sorts of things. They're gone, but they may not be gone, and it's hard, because I do not believe that it is entirely down to will. I do fundamentally know that our mental health has a big impact on our physical health. It's something that seems to be well known, but it's not the only factor. And do I want to spend my last 6 months, year, 2 years, 5 years, maybe 25 years, deciding that I can't have something, or at least try for it? But on the other hand, is it fair to try for something that's fairly futile? Look, I'm not here saying I've got the answers, because I clearly don't. I'm a fellow traveller. What I do know is that the best I can do, I'm trying to do, is to accept what I know and work from there. And that's not always easy, and it's not always pleasant, and the whole thing is desperately painful at times. But I equally don't want to spend, as I say, none of us know how long we've got. It could be years and years and years, and it could be much shorter. Could get run over by a bus tomorrow, as they say. But I don't want to spend whatever time I have yearning for the impossible. Yearning's not going to do me much good. If I did want to be, I keep using the example of concert pianist, I don't, but if I did, then I certainly wouldn't want to give up getting the pleasure I have from playing the piano. Whether my sole aim in life is to play at Carnegie Hall, or the Royal Festival Hall in London, or wherever, that's a different matter. But but setting goals that allow you to do challenging things, to listen to great music, whatever the music is that you enjoy. That might be something. If it's a yearning for love and being, lying on a beach with your beloved, sipping cocktails, and you're single, then, in the words of the great song, love the ones you're with. And be sure that you are getting and giving love to the people who are around you, who you do love. Could be your best friend or your mother or your sister, close cousin, whoever. Get the most out of those relationships too, because nothing is more difficult for other people to handle than your bitter and angry face. I think humans seem to do much better with upset or pained or tired. There's something, maybe it's because it's seen as aggressive to our more primitive natures. We don't do well with seeing somebody looking pinched and bitter and cross about everything. And it's certainly not doing you any good. So, all easier said than done. I'm struggling with it all the time, but I sadly don't think there's much of a alternative than to taking your fundamentals, the things you know about yourself, your ambitions, your goals, and just making them more you-sized. So you may not be playing for, I'd say, Millwall, because that will upset everyone, by the end of the month. But it might mean that you work there by the end of the year, or you start contacting them, working out whether there are things that they do that help raise money for cancer charities that you can get involved in and get contacts that way. So sometimes maybe it's seeing what those core things are about us and not giving up on them, but just tweaking them and seeing how they fit in with the reality that we all have to live with now. And that's the reality of cancer, but it's also the reality of an economy that's up the creek. And I can say that confidently because I'm not sure, unless it's Hello Singapore, that and many people are escaping that. The job market, the housing problems, the violence, the crime problems, these are not things that deserve to strip you of who you want to be. They really don't. And I don't want them to strip me of who I want to be. But as I say, it's a daily battle. And maybe in some ways it will be a lifelong battle, I don't know. But it certainly is a daily battle. Now, I'm going to be back really soon, so I'll see you then. And until then, you take very good care of yourself. Thanks.